Hey everyone, this is Jason Venable, also known as Tenerd on Force.com, and I just want to walk through a little app I built here called the Force.com Latency Tester. And so what this does is it basically measures the amount of time it takes for a request to hit Salesforce.com, an external server, back to Salesforce.com, and then back to the web browser client. And so what you can do with this is you basically just put in a URL. In this case, it's a simple Node.js app running on Heroku. Then you just hit ping. And so when you do this, you'll see that there are two numbers here. There's one called server latency and client latency. So I'm clicking this button and you can see some of the stuff happening here, or the results loading. And server latency is really low. Client latency is about, low 200s. And so I'm just going to walk through the code here and kind of explain how all this works. So on the page, there is that input button that has an on-click handler here called ping remote URL. And that kicks off this method down here. So we're just grabbing the URL from that input field. And then we're setting a timer. We're basically getting the number of milliseconds since 1970. And then we'll do this later and compare the differences. So we set that timer. And then we make a Visualforce remoting call to Apex code, which basically just sends up the URL and then has this callback function when everything completes. So at this point, let's just pretend we're sending the request up to Salesforce.com. And now this Apex code is executing, this ping remote URL method, which takes in the URL, builds an HTTP request, gets everything set up. It's a simple get. And then this too also sets a little timer here. The request happens, gets a response back, and the timer is stopped. So this is really measuring how much time it takes Salesforce.com servers with Apex to reach out to Heroku and get a response back. And then it basically stops, gets the difference, and returns that back to the client here, which then stops that client-side timer. It then simply updates the table of all the results, and that's it. So it has the server time and the client time updated in this table. Where is it? Here it is. And so one thing to note with this isn't really truly network latency. This is more of an application latency, if that's even a real word. Because what it's doing is it's testing the amount of time for all of the software to handle the response in terms of this request running through the JavaScript, Salesforce spinning up their software stack to do the request out to the external server software stack handling that request and providing a response. And so it's really not true networking latency, but it is kind of what a user would experience. And so you can see that the times between Salesforce servers and Heroku is actually quite fast. It's, less than 20 milliseconds, which is pretty good considering it has to spin up the software stack and make that request. Not too bad at all. I've seen it as low as 10, but I've seen it as high as a couple hundred sometimes. And I don't know if that's on Salesforce's side or Heroku's side. Usually when I just ping the server directly, Heroku, I'll get about 30 milliseconds or 40 milliseconds. And so most of the time, Salesforce or Heroku is a lot faster, which makes sense because they're both going to be on some really big fiber pipes connecting each other. Client latency, on the other hand, I think is a little slow, and I think it'd be great if Salesforce could improve this, especially considering this operation in Apex is doing no queries and doing no DML operations, which tend to be fairly expensive. And so even so, with remoting, which is quite fast, it usually takes between 200 and 250 milliseconds for that transaction to occur. Not bad, but I always want to be faster. And so this is the Force.com latency tester. All of the code is up on GitHub. You can check it out here. Just github/tenerd, and then here's the repository name. I'll be able to find it there. So there it is. I'm curious what other people see around the world with their different times and hitting different servers that are not like Heroku, maybe a homegrown app or something like that. So this is going to be posted on my blog, so you can leave comments in there or on this YouTube. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.